The morning of April 14, 1919, a walled dirt courtyard in the city of Amritsar sits in heavy silence. Hours earlier, this space held thousands of men, women, and children. Now, the ground is soaked in blood. Look closely at the brick walls framing the enclosure. These white squares mark a dense, overlapping pattern of bullet strikes. The damage stretches far across the perimeter. Trapped in a sudden crossfire, thousands of people scrambled to find any escape. Dozens threw themselves into a deep, open well on the grounds, preferring the fall over the incoming gunfire. The physical evidence left behind reveals a specific intent. This was a state-sponsored execution, marking a shift in how the British administration was perceived. During the First World War, India supplied over 1 million soldiers to fight for the British crown. In return, the Indian public expected steps toward self-governance. Instead, the Crown tightened its grip. In 1919, the colonial government passed the Rowlatt Act. This diagram illustrates how the law bypassed standard justice. The British could now imprison any Indian citizen without a warrant, stripping away 3 basic rights: no lawyer, no hearing, and no appeal. The passage of the act sparked nationwide outrage. Massive, peaceful protests paralyzed cities, organized by emerging political leaders like Mahatma Gandhi. The British administration was terrified of losing its colonial monopoly. To maintain authority, they criminalized basic political dissent, creating the conditions for a violent collision. This photograph shows the dense, narrow streets of Amritsar. On April 10th, British authorities secretly arrested 2 popular local leaders. When the news leaked, the streets erupted into localized riots. Government buildings were burned, and several British officials were killed. The British response was handed over to General Reginald Dyer, a hardline military commander who believed the native population could only be controlled through absolute terror and the enforcement of martial law. Dyer immediately banned all public gatherings. However, April 13th was Baisakhi, Punjab's harvest festival. Thousands of ordinary citizens from neighboring villages poured into Amritsar, unaware that a ban had been enacted. You now have a ruthless military officer determined to enforce submission, and a massive influx of uninformed civilians gathering to celebrate. These factors created the conditions for a slaughter. By late afternoon on April 13th, 15,000 to 20,000 people had gathered in Jallianwala Bagh. Some were there to listen to political speeches, while others were resting from the festival. Jallianwala Bagh's physical layout was a lethal trap. High brick walls enclosed the compound, leaving just one narrow entrance. General Dyer marched 90 soldiers down that alleyway, lining them across the entrance, cutting off the only escape route. If the goal was to disperse a gathering, you leave a way out. By sealing the bottleneck, Dyer ensured that those inside could not leave. Dyer gave no warning. He commanded his men to open fire. Within seconds, the compound collapsed into a blinding panic of dust and frantic motion. The firing continued for 10 minutes. Dyer directed his soldiers to adjust their aim toward the thickest parts of the crowd, and to shoot down those trying to scale the high brick walls. This is the structure surrounding the compound's well today. As the bullets rained down, dozens of people threw themselves inside to escape the fire. Most drowned or were crushed to death as more bodies fell on top of them. The soldiers stopped shooting only when their ammunition was nearly depleted. In total, they had fired over 1,600 rounds. The duration and the targeted nature of the fire indicate an intention to maximize casualties. Official records state nearly 400 people died on the spot, though Indian estimates put the number well over 1,000. Another 1,500 people lay wounded in the dirt. General Dyer then enforced a strict overnight curfew across Amritsar. Anyone caught on the streets would be shot. Families could hear the screams of the wounded from inside the compound, but were forbidden from bringing water or medical aid. Those who survived the initial barrage were left to bleed to death in the dark. That night shattered the image of the British administration as a provider of justice. During the official inquiries that followed, General Dyer showed no remorse. He stated that his intention was not to disperse the crowd, but to punish them and teach a lesson to the entire Punjab. He believed the slaughter would cement British dominance through fear. Instead, subjecting unarmed civilians to such calculated brutality eradicated the public's fear of colonial retaliation. The atrocity alienated the country's elite intellectuals. Rabindranath Tagore, the Nobel laureate seen in this photograph, wrote to the viceroy, renouncing his British knighthood in protest. This display of extreme violence unified the subcontinent. Scattered political grievances coalesced into a singular, uncompromising movement for total independence. The day after the massacre, an 11-year-old boy bypassed the curfew and walked into Jallianwala Bagh. He collected a sample of the blood-soaked dirt into a glass jar. His name was Bhagat Singh. That soil became a symbol for a new generation of revolutionaries who refused to negotiate, accepting nothing less than the total removal of the British administration. Today, Jallianwala Bagh is preserved as a memorial. It is a site of grief and the geographic origin of India's unified demand for sovereignty. The massacre at Jallianwala Bagh became the point of no return for British rule. By using lethal force against unarmed civilians, the empire lost its remaining legitimacy, setting in motion the final decades of the struggle for Indian independence.